I'm Dina Newman. I am the director of the Center for Neighborhoods. I'm also the founder of Kansas City Black Urban Growers, or KC Bugs, in Kansas City. And I'm curious, how many are you here for extra credit? Just shake. Don't be ashamed. Raise your hand. Okay, one was honest.
Or
Okay,
class
cool.
credit.
And credit? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here, and hopefully this will be a good use of your time over the next hour. So my background, I'm a community organizer. I am not an academic. Some of my best friends are academics, but that's not me. I am a practitioner of community engagement, authentic community engagement. And again, thanks to Professor Wayne for bringing me here. We've had great meals, great conversations. We had a little bit of fun last night. I got a gift bag, we've got snacks, so thank you for making me feel very welcome for being here. So Kansas City is a bi-state. There's Kansas City, Kansas, and then there's Kansas City, Missouri. For the purposes of this conversation, because I'm on the Missouri side, I will be speaking mainly about Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City sits on the ancestral tribal lands of the Osage, the Kaw, the Shawnee, the Oto-Missouria, and the Delaware tribes. We have about 500,000 people in Kansas City, 319 square miles. It's huge. We have 57% white, 25% black, 12% Hispanic or Latino, 8% identify as mixed race, and 2% Asian. The median income is $67,000, and about 15% of people live in poverty. So what we have a picture here is area planning versus neighborhood planning. The picture on your left is how the city defines Kansas City neighborhoods. We have 18 area plans across the city. The map that you see on your right are actually all neighborhood organizations, 240 plus. Each neighborhood has its own distinct characteristic, strength, and challenge. And while the city has given its geographical boundaries to these neighborhoods, the neighborhoods don't always agree. Most of the time that's not an issue unless and until sometimes the boundaries overlap with one another. So in our leadership training class, which I will talk about here in a few minutes, neighborhood leaders are given a map when they come into our training, and we ask them to identify the boundaries of their neighborhood. I think it's been almost every single class we've had, there's been at least one neighborhood association who've changed the boundaries. And that's fine, because it's based on their knowledge and their experience of their community. In 2014, Dr. Jacob Wagner, who's actually my boss and co-founder of the Center for Neighborhoods, was approached by the state senator, Shalon Kiki Curls, to explore what it would look like to have a one-stop shop for neighborhoods. It was going to be a place where neighborhoods could get the resources, the knowledge, and the support that they need to address the challenges in their communities. So in 2015, the Center for Neighborhoods was created as a research and outreach unit in the urban planning and design program. We started out in the College of Arts and Sciences, but recently we moved to the Division of the Natural and Built Environment in the School of Science and Engineering. We have a small staff of 4, and as Wayne mentioned, we always have a student intern, a paid student intern, who helps us out. The Center for Neighborhoods is a catalyst for university-community partnerships that provides leadership training, organizational development, applied urban planning research, and technical assistance to neighborhood organizations, home associations, and leaders. And that's important to remember because there are neighborhood associations that have their own governing board and power, and then you have the home associations, which are basically tied to the land. This is what it looked like on our grand opening in 2016. Now, this is our office. It is on Truce Avenue. So we always say when we talk neighborhoods, we're already talking race. Truce Avenue is the so-called dividing line in Kansas City. To the east are our black and brown neighborhoods. To the west typically are your white, upper middle class neighborhoods. So it was intentional that we put our office on Truce on the east side because we wanted to bring folks together. The university actually sits on the west side of Truce, but we are on the east side. And I think this picture speaks volumes because there was such a diversity on our grand opening of age and race and educational attainment. There were so many people that came out. We had students, we had scholars, our chancellor was there. So again, it really reflects what we were hoping to get by bringing everyone together at that opening. So why neighborhoods? Neighborhoods are critical to the health of the city, the state, and the economy. Neighborhood leaders are champions of neighborhood investment, local democratic participation in community investment decisions, and first responders for neighborhood concerns and crises. And we say, because neighborhood leaders know what goes on in their communities after 5 o'clock, they know what's going on. Oftentimes, particularly in communities where they're high crime, oftentimes it's the neighborhood leader and the participants who will get there before the police get there. They know what's going on. So we like to say they're our first responders for neighborhoods. The challenge ahead, neighborhood organizations often struggle to address a wide range of problems with low levels of capacity. And as small volunteer organizations, and that's important to remember too, these neighborhood leaders are volunteers, very few are paid. They often lack access to basic technical assistance and support services that are necessary to maintain basic operations and improve effectiveness. Without these neighborhood associations, collaboration can be ineffective and counterproductive. Neighborhood investment doesn't happen or is not properly utilized. Assets in the community is not leveraged, and neighborhoods have less impact and voice in community conversations. So keeping that in mind, we decided to start the Neighborhood Center for Neighborhoods. And what the neighborhood leaders told us was they needed a place where they could come and work together to address these challenges. We like to say we engage, equip, and empower neighborhood leaders with the tools that they need to go back into the community and do that work. And out of that, we created our flagship program, which we call Cohort. Cohort is a 12-week free program. It is open to all neighborhood leaders, advocates, and residents, and we have it on campus. Again, because we're an urban serving university, there are many people in our community who've never stepped foot on campus. So that was intentional about having these classes. They are not for continuing ed yet, but that is something that I'm working on. I hope we will be able to do that at some point. It's a Tuesday night for 3 hours from 5 to 8, which is quite a commitment. And they must participate 80% of the time to graduate. We average about 22 to 25 people. They come in pairs because life happens. They're representing their neighborhood. Someone might not be able to come, but if there are 2 people there, that helps take the pressure off. And we feed them because folks are coming in at 5 o'clock. It's important that we recognize that they are experts, that they are giving up their time, they are volunteers, so the least we could do is provide a decent meal for them. Since 2016, we've had 166 neighborhood organizations, 305 participants. We try to do 2 a fall and a spring cohort each year. We took 1 year off after COVID, and our cohort 16 will start in 2 weeks. So I've got to get back and get going on that. Our curriculum is rooted in ABCD, asset-based community development mindset. We look at the assets of the community. Now, many of these neighborhoods come in and they already know the challenges. In fact, they've been rewarded for challenges. was telling the students yesterday, when you get a grant, it's not how great you're doing, it's just how bad the situation is in the community, right? So they already know when they come in. We flip that script and we ask them to look at the assets of their community. Assets are people, places, and things, right? So that is our foundation, but we have 5 pillars: leadership and governance, planning and development, technology and communications, health and safety, which is kind of my wheelhouse, and our 5th pillar, which we're actually building the curriculum on right now, is culture, creativity, and history. And when we talk about leadership and governance, we're talking about your basic, bylaws, how to be good neighbors, what do we need to do in our community to build the capacity and address the challenges. When we talk about planning and development, we're talking about neighborhoods that still have 95 acres of vacant land, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it. We teach them how to have conversations with planners, how to deal with the city, because these are the things in the community that are going to be sustainable, and the neighborhood leader will be responsible for being able to carry out. So that's planning and development. Technology and communications, the digital divide is real, still real. We still have neighborhood leaders who are writing on paper and pen flyers that pass out in the community. So we have a lab where they can come, a computer lab, and they're able to come in, and we give them the help that they need to be able to navigate the challenges of technology. Health and safety, we look at the culture of health of the community. While individual health is really, really important, we also look at, is your neighborhood healthy? If you live in a neighborhood where the highway was cut the neighborhood in half, and you're dealing with, transmission, what does it look like for, your children with asthma, for instance? Or we have neighborhoods that have become illegal dumping sites. So we look again at the health of the entire community. And then culture, creativity, and history, again, we're building that out because so many of these neighborhoods have rich culture and rich history, and we want to be able to tap into that. So now that I've given you some background on Center for Neighborhoods, let's talk about authentic community engagement and how it makes our cities better. That's the title of this talk. So I mentioned that neighborhoods are critical to the health and safety of the city, the state, and the economy. Some neighborhoods are solid. They have very, very strong leadership. They have money in the bank, diverse memberships, and willing participants, active participants, while other neighborhoods are really, really struggling. They're facing everyday challenges of disinvestment, historical and equitable distribution of wealth and power, community health and safety issues, as I mentioned, like crime and illegal dumping, poor infrastructure. Seniors are not aging out well. There's a lack of affordability, a lack of affordable housing, and on and on and on. And this is why institutions and organizations and cities need to understand that neighborhood leaders can help or hurt. They can move things forward, or they can completely shut down your project. Authentic community engagement is not only essential for working in and with the community, it's simply the right thing to do. So what are some best practices of community engagement? Engage early and often. Don't wait until you need the community. Get out, get to know who they are, get to understand their challenges so that you have that track record of being connected with them before you need them. Don't bring your neighbors or your community into your project or research after the fact. Value and invest in the expertise of the community and the neighborhood leaders. Again, neighborhood folk are experts of their own experience. They are experts in their community. And it's important that you tap into that expertise, again, before, during, and after your project. And recognize that neighborhood leaders are producers of knowledge, They're co-teachers, and they also are co-creators in the work. Don't forget that. And it's personal. Language matters. I know we tend to do the, ABC and this and this and this. You have to be, I'm not saying talk down to neighborhood leaders, but make it make sense, right? Recognize cultural differences. So a lot of our work, we are in what I call communities of concern. I brought that term out of Oakland. I try not to use the term disinvested or underserved, because community of concern does not necessarily have to be a black or brown community. It can be a community, let's say a poor white community, or a community where the seniors are just not aging out well, right? So I use this term communities of concern. And a lot of our communities of concern, there's cultural differences and cultural competency. I'm thinking about to the time we had a student work in one of our primarily black neighborhoods, and they were sitting around and was talking to the neighborhood leaders, and one of the students called Miss Smith by her first name. And I was like, no, he didn't. Oh my gosh. In certain communities, you don't do that, right? You earn the respect. The neighborhood leaders are looking at these students and saying, okay, you're coming into my house, you're coming into on my turf, and you have to meet me where I am. So one of the things that we do, Dr. Wagner makes it clear with his students, we have like a small training before they go into the community, and we look at cultural competency, we look at those things that are really important to the community so that they will be able to build authentic relationship. Again, listening matters and reporting back with accuracy. It's very, very important. If you're going to do the work in the community, just don't just leave. We talked yesterday about community benefits agreements. These are agreements that community often have with the city or developer or an organization. And sometimes they're pretty big. Sometimes it's just a small, almost like an MOU of understanding where you're going to get something, I'm going to get something, and we're going to be respected on both sides. And again, build relationships for future engagement. What I like about this t-shirt, it has 5 languages. So authentic community engagement means centering the people in the community. Sometimes it means meeting in the evening. Sometimes it means meeting on a Saturday or a Sunday, getting out of your comfort zone to meet with the people that you really need to meet with. Right? It means sometimes taking care of the kids that are at these meetings. So that may mean getting a grant to help pay for childcare. If you have a meeting after 5 o'clock, people are coming in hungry. Have food. Don't just have chips and pop. That's disrespectful. Have food to help feed these folks who are coming in to give up their time and their expertise. You may have to schedule a meeting again in the evening when you get off work and you're tired. But this is the opportunity to bring in more people who are also working a lot of the times and can't make a 2 o'clock Monday meeting, right? Because they are working. I love this shirt that PK is wearing because she lives in a part of Kansas City called the Northeast. In that neighborhood, I think there are 34 different languages spoken, huge community of different races, different ethnicities. But they want to engage everyone in the community, and they want to do it in real time. And they want to make sure that everyone understands what's happening or what's going to happen. So what they have done is they've gotten funding to have interpreters at the meetings. So if you speak French, so in the Northeast there are a lot of Somali residents, and they speak French. So they've actually hired one of the neighborhood residents who speaks French so imagine this big meeting, and they'll go around a corner, and everyone that speaks French, the interpreter is interpreting what's happening in the meeting. Same thing with Spanish. I think this is Mom, if someone knows, correct me. And I believe it is, I think it's Mom, French, English. I can't remember. Anyway, they make sure, again, that it's happening in real time and that all the different languages in the community are understanding what is happening in the community. So when they have to address a certain issue, it's a united voice. They've all been together, they've all looked at the situation, and they've all been able to move forward on the next project. So some of the best practices, again, planning and research fatigue, that's real. As a university, it's really easy to get caught up in the research, the authorship, the academics, the IRB, and all the things that make us part of a university. And as the city, it's easy to get caught up in those politics, the ego tripping and the deadlines. We tend to have a tendency to go into the communities, study them to death, extract whatever we can, take our leave, get our grant check, and then we move on. And neighborhood leaders are really getting tired of that. Authentic community engagement recognizes that these unpaid volunteer leaders are champions who are really working hard to help their communities. Communities grow tired of the same questions being asked over and over. And as a university, we tend to do that because we work in silos sometimes. And this department may have a grant to go into this neighborhood to do this work, while another department may get another grant and decide to go in and hadn't checked with the other department, and the neighborhood is looking, going, wait, we just went through this with another UMKC department. So it's really important to have that line of communication between departments so that you are not continuing to go to these same communities over and over asking the same questions. Due diligence. Don't put people through a process for something that's already been done. We see that as well, right? It's really important, again, that you build that relationship, like I said at the beginning, before, middle, and after, so you are aware of what's happening in that community. Because like I said, planning and research fatigue, that is very, very real. So I am going to share a few examples of what authentic community engagement really looks like and when it's done well. This is Hickman Mills United. It is a coalition of several neighborhoods and part of a town. It has several highways going through it. 47% rental, 6,000 units, 58,000 is the median income. 13,000 people, 57% black, 30% white. Now the problem that was happening in this community, there was an abundance of gas stations and underground storage tanks. The permitting process and the planning processes were inadequate to reduce the concentration of noxious land uses, especially in communities like theirs. So the neighborhood association had had enough. They got together and they decided that it was time to go to City Hall to champion on behalf of their neighborhood to address this issue. They worked with the Center for Neighborhoods, they worked with some of our planners, and they created a draft primer. Then they got a champion with City Hall. And that makes a huge difference. One of our councilmen that represented this district was like on board. And they were able to introduce a moratorium on both liquor stores and gas stations. In some of our communities, they kind of go hand in hand, an abundance of liquor stores and gas stations. So this, like I said, these neighborhoods had had enough of it, they organized each other, and they created this moratorium. And what was brilliant, the moratorium actually referenced the city's climate protection and resiliency plan. So they were addressing greenhouse gas emissions, exposures to contaminants that associate with gas stations, and the threat to public health and safety. So they were able to use what they already had to address those challenges. Another example is in 2022, the Urban Land Institute published a report that questioned how can an equitable park system be created that would benefit everyone and not just the privileged few? So remember, again, this is in 2020, COVID, the murder of George Floyd, sudden racial reckoning was taking place across the nation. So we were contacted by the Parks and Rec director, and they needed an approach of how to address these challenges of parks in certain neighborhoods, and I'll just say they were mainly in the Black neighborhoods who had been disinvested in years. There were 6 neighborhoods that were considered low life expectancy, and that's based on data, and Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has a really good report on that. They looked at these 6 zip codes. There were 38 parks in there, and they wanted to create a different district for those parks, and they were going to address those challenges and, again, those years of disinvestment and put money into it. And they called it QLID, the Quality of Life Investment District. They came to us, help us, what do we do? So we came up with a model that we thought was pretty unique. We actually hired 6 neighborhood leaders in those zip codes. We got a grant, Parks and Rec paid us. We got a grant to help them figure out how to address the challenges in these parks. And what made sense was to look at the people who lived there in these neighborhoods in the first place to help develop these plans. It wasn't for the university, it really wasn't for the Center for Neighborhoods to do this work. It was those who lived by these parks, not in the parks, but by these parks. So we called them park stewards. There were 6 of them. Each park steward was assigned a zip code. In each zip code, there may be up to 12 parks. Some stewards had more parks, some had less parks. Over a year, the park stewards went into training. They learned everything from, like, we went to the parks archivist to learn the history of the parks. They went and reviewed the parks, looked at the parks at all hours of the night because they wanted to see what was happening. They went seasonally, more work was happening, more entertainment was happening in the park in the summer, but what does it look like after dark? We had 6 students that we also paid to help. The students went out and took lots of pictures. They talked to the people around the park. We really needed to get a real snapshot of what was happening in these parks, right? We also hired a student, an English student who was working on her master's because we needed someone to help us put all this together. And we created what we called the park-centric plans. I made that word up and I'm trying to figure out how to trademark it, so if anybody knows how, let me know. We created 38 park-centric plans. Now, these plans are the actual voice, if you will, of the community around these parks. And I do have a few up here afterwards if you guys want to take a look at those. The park plans, again, represent the work over a year of what was decided for these parks. So there were parks that didn't have benches. There were parks that the playground equipment was broken. So they did these assessments, these really, really long assessments. And then they made their recommendations of what needed to be done in the parks. And from that recommendation, again, we had the park-centric plans. This is some of the park stewards meeting with the parks director after the plans went out, because it was like, you know, we didn't do this just for these plans to sit on a shelf. We want you to implement them. And the park stewards were adamant about that. And they went to the director and was like, this is what the people say, this is what we need in these parks. He was like, okay, all right. Well, we didn't see any movement for a while, so then the park stewards wanted to meet with the park commission board, which they did. And the Parks Commission Board adopted the plans and said, okay, this will be our roadmap for these 38 parks going forward, and how we will do our work, and how we will try to reallocate dollars to put into these parks. What has spawned out of that is, with these park stewards, word got around that they've done really incredible work. So there was another project that came about called the Woods Project. And what you see, that green strip of forest, that's 47 acres of virgin forest right in the hood. And it's untouched. And most people don't even know it's there. You just drive by it all the time. You're really not paying much attention to it. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And the park stewards and the neighborhood folks were like, we want to keep it like this. We don't want development. We don't want people to come in and, you know, turn this into like a Central Park. We just need to leave it alone. Well, saying that and actually moving toward making this happen has been a lot of work. Meeting with the city, meeting with the neighborhood leaders, coming up with a plan to preserve this 47, these 40 acres. We are still in the process of working with different organizations. We have a concept plan, mostly maybe a few trails, some bee boxes in there. There's a stream, they want a daylight. Some benches, just a nice place for the community that lives around. Not necessarily the destination place, but just kind of leave it as it is. The park stewards are continuing to do this work, but now, because they're so popular and fancy, we've actually changed their name to Neighborhood Conservation and Environmental Stewards. We actually got a grant recently for the Neighborhood Environmental Stewards to continue this work, because what we found out, I don't know if this is happening here, but there has to be a water sewer separation. It's fairly mandated. That's happening in Kansas City, and now those pipes go through some of that forest. And the neighborhood folks want to make sure it's green infrastructure that's happening. They're not going to come through, tear all this up with a lot of concrete. There were, I think, 27 different species of trees in there, lots of critters. So they want it to be safe, but they also want them to do it environmentally sound. So the parks, the Neighborhood Conservation and Environmental Stewards are working on this project with the city, with the engineering firm that has this job, and with the community. Oh, I'm at the end, wait. Any questions?
When you reach the communities, usually you find the leaders there, or you build the leaders there with the communities in the local place, or like, how do I put it? Did you form the leaders there, or you already find them there?
Most of the time, the leaders are already there.
I have a second question.
Okay.
If I go to the one community that there is no like formation of leaders, how do I work with this community?
So we have seen where we've had people come through our class with that exact problem and say, my neighborhood doesn't have an association. How do I start it? We provide them with the tools so that they can do that. You have to start, if you want to be registered with the state, we help them do that. If you want to be registered with the city, we help them with that. And then part of it is actually getting out, knocking on doors, getting to know people in that community so you can kind of build that bench to be able to, build up your neighborhood association. Now, I will say, we've also had neighborhood associations where there's been challenges, and unfortunately, there's been splits. Now, we don't like that. We don't like that, to happen. We're not promoting that, but it has happened.
Thank you.
To answer your question.
You had mentioned that communities with high elderly populations were not aging out well, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate on kind of the sort of struggles.
So I'm thinking about a neighborhood where it's primarily white, single family homes. The folks are 60, 70, 80 years old, and they're not very active in the neighborhood association or the HOA, and they're sitting at home with the shades drawn. They're not getting out very much, and when you find out what has happened, it's like, oh my gosh. So I'm thinking of someone who didn't have air conditioning, and it's getting hotter and hotter, and I didn't know he didn't have air conditioning, and once I found out, I was like, what can we do to help to make sure you get air conditioning? And basically he said it was an affordability issue. I can't afford it, right? At the same time, there was a program that was going on, I think it was called Solar for All. They were doing a pilot project, and they were looking for certain homes, older homes, with good roofs, because you have to have a decent roof, right, for solar panels. And he turned out to be a really good candidate for this program. He now got solar panels, has solar panels on his house, and he sent me an email and said, hey, look at my electric bill now. It was so reduced, he is now able to get a small window unit, air conditioning unit. It's only in one room, but at least he can cool down in the heat of the summer. So again, sometimes you don't know what's going on until you find out. There are seniors that, have fallen. They have steps. And there's a program that actually helped put in ramps. So not aging out well as seniors, I'm talking about that. Sometimes they are so food insecure because their Social Security or whatever pension they may have is not enough for affordable, healthy food. So that's an issue as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
There's somebody in the back, and then I'll come back to you. I thought I sent somebody back there. No? Okay.
So you talked about kind of how the health and safety it was. I think health and safety was your wheelhouse kind of. Is there a way that you quantify how you guys are progressing with those things or degressing? How does that work? How do you make sure
That's a great question.
things are happening?
What we say is the neighborhood organizations, their success is our success. So one measure that we have is how many grants are neighborhood associations getting? Not just grants, but city dollars. So we keep track of that. We also look at if there are issues like with crime. Is there a crime reduction? And what, if there is, what is attributing to that? So we were able to extrapolate that information as measures as well. We measure how many people are coming through class, how many people sign up. So we've had up to 52 applications at one time. And we count that as interest. Oh, folks are interested in this program and they need to come through. So those are a few of the measures of how we're measuring our success. It's kind of hard because, sometimes you don't see it until you see it. Where, new sidewalks, one neighborhood association had been championed for sidewalks for years. They came through class, we gave them some of the good stuff to help them get back out and to, negotiate with the city. And they now have new sidewalks after many, many years. Wayne?
You've talked about sort of planning, being a partner with you and come and talk a cohort, but you also had an example of Parks Department maybe being a little bit resistant to change. You want to talk about sort of what's the process for winning them over, for them to see that you're a partner instead of a thorn in their sides?
The Parks Department? Or just
Any city department, yeah.
Again, it's kind of on the neighborhoods, right? We make sure that, so when we are approached about a certain project and there's some resistance and there's, trouble in paradise there, when we can, we bring the partners together. And again, we're looking through that ABCD mind, we're looking at the assets. And we're saying, okay, what's the best outcome that we can work toward, and let's work on that. We know there are challenges, but let's look at, again, the best assets and we work toward that. That answers your question. It's not easy. It's not easy work.
Hi Dina, great talk. I found some kind of organizational questions. Like how many professors are involved in the center? How many students is part of a student sequence at every semester or every second semester? Students, are they involved to the studio and internships? And what commitment comes from the university? Like, are they putting money to it, or is it you that are leading the center and that's their only commitment?
Good question. So we're funded by the state as a part of the university. We have one little line, we have one line item, and we also have to write grants. Now, I will tell you, our rule is we don't compete with our neighborhoods for grant funding because chances are we're gonna get it and they're not. So when necessary, we'll provide a letter of support or whatever for the neighborhood association. But yes, we have to raise some of our own funds. The professor, so Dr. Wagner, who is actually co-founder of the Center for Neighborhoods, he's involved, Dr. Mike Frisch, Dr. Julia Crawley. So we have about 4 professors in AUPD that are involved. Students, we always make sure we have students and we pay them. I was telling the class yesterday, I was like, it's not a lot of money, it's $17 an hour. And a couple students were like, what? That's a lot of money. So we try to make sure that we have at least one student. Right now we have a student who is focused on writing a blog. He attends all the different city meetings and his blog is talking about what's happening at City Hall and kind of puts that in layman's terms. Let me see, what was your other question?
Yeah, commitment from the university. Maybe that was already answered in your post.
It didn't hurt that the PAB board came in and gave us like raving reviews as a part of the institution of the university, how important our work is. We have been acknowledged that this work is very, very important because we're surrounded by all these different neighborhoods.
But
as a small center, we're still fairly new. We are building those relationships. I will tell you, on campus, we realize that there's still a lot of different departments that don't know about us. So part of that work is on us, that we have to get out and do some partnerships ourselves with some of the different departments. We had a really good grant, $15 million grant with the School of Medicine, where we were bringing in neighborhood leaders to put on community clinics in their communities. That was fantastic. That was over a 2-year project. So because that project was so huge and was funded by the county, got lots and lots of publicity, and which of course gave us a little publicity as well.
thank you.
You're welcome. Peter?
Thank you for a great talk. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about scale and like the scale that you're operating at. So are there examples, are there times when like what's good for the neighborhood is different than what's good for the city as a whole. And like when you need to zoom out a little bit and see that bigger picture.
Good question. We have that a lot. We do, because some neighborhoods, I mean, again, they feel that they know what's best for their community. They're the ones there. They are there, you know, I keep saying after 5 o'clock. And the city, because it's the city, I'm thinking mostly about development. That it's good, you know, to invest in these houses and build, and often what you end up seeing, and it, you know, when the conversation first started, it seems like it's okay, but by the time in, you have gentrification that has happened. I mean, we've had neighborhoods that are just like, whoa, how did this happen? And I'm thinking, you know, about where this one neighborhood, the housing was supposed to be affordable housing, they got 25-year tax abatement. Next to a little tiny neighborhood house, that their property tax went up because this big mansion was just built next to my little tiny house. There's a lot of push and pull. There are lots of neighborhood meetings with the city on some of these issues, and I'm just going to tell you, sometimes the neighborhood does not win. They just don't win. Other times, like I'm thinking like Hickman Mills, it was triumphant. They were able to, you know, put this moratorium on gas stations and kind of shut that down for a while. So there's tension, there's that push and pull. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could speak on your experience with students working with the community, and if you have any like notable experiences about how that's gone, specifically like response from community members, and like if there's any mindsets or intentions of the students coming in that like creates the most positive outcomes for everyone involved.
So I'm thinking of Thomas, who is actually one of my staff members. He started out as our intern. He was fantastic. Thomas went into the community humble. Really went into this, and it was a black community. Thomas is white, it was a black community, went into this community humble. And he was willing to learn as much as he was willing to teach. And there were a couple of projects that they worked on. When he got out of that project, he graduated from our program as a planner and was looking for a job. And I was like, we have to hire Thomas. He's done an incredible job. Well, at that point, he had already built a relationship with that neighborhood association. So sometimes if we need Thomas to kind of go in, because he's already built that relationship, and there's one lady, one neighborhood leader actually refers to him in public as my Thomas. You know, she is adopted Thomas because he's amazing. So yeah, yeah, I'm thinking of Thomas. The student work is, we couldn't do it without the students. We are a small staff. Again, we don't have a lot of money. And the students, it provides opportunities for them to get that real life world experience. And then we're able to, you know, again, allow them to help us do some of this heavy lifting that we have to do. Thank you. Amy?
I'm wondering if you offer any training or guidance to the city side, because I think cities endeavor to do good public engagement, but we're pretty terrible at it sometimes. And so I don't know if you've ever worked on that side.
Sort of, kind of. So just a few months ago, the city reached out to us because they were getting ready to create their community engagement plan for the city. And we are recognized as kind of an expert in that. So the city reached out to us, and we had what they call speakeasies. We had several of those in different parts of the city, and we facilitated those conversations. I will say that the city offers a program sort of similar to ours, where you go and you learn everything about the city. So it's kind of reciprocity. We send people to that class, and then they send folks over to our neighborhood leader. And I've got to tell you, when you've had a neighborhood leader who's done both of the programs, they are powerful. They are very well informed of what's happening. Yes, in the back.
So a lot of your photos were of adults attending your events, and I'm curious about the youth of those neighborhoods, because I know growing up in Lawrence, I didn't even know there was a, thank you. I didn't even know there was a profession called regional planning. But I worked in an office that did that work. So I'm wondering what is the development you're seeing as a baby org to now in your future steps to advance?
Hello, Lawrence, Kansas, y'all know it's on the Kansas side, hello, Lawrence. So, in class, and this is kind of a small thing, but it's kind of large. In class, sometimes we have, I'm thinking of a neighborhood leader, she's a grandma, and she was raising her grandkids, and she brought her kids to class with us. So inadvertently, these kids were getting exposed to what the grandmother was getting exposed to. I will tell you, the neighborhoods, this is a big topic. And neighborhood leaders are talking about, we have to have like a youth program. And not just your typical youth program, right? We need a leadership youth program. We've had neighborhood leaders work with a group called Youth Ambassadors. And these youth ambassadors are, I think they're 15 to 18 maybe, who are working on the same issues that we're doing. So we tend to, support them, that work. And, NOMA, they have on campus a summer program with Black youth of architecture students come in, and we're there to help them along as well. I've been able to go over and speak with those youth as well. But it's a challenge. It is a challenge.
Would you feel comfortable saying anything about how the center is thinking about the current federal situation? Feel free to say pass.
We're concerned. We're concerned. That big grant that I talked about was ARPA dollars, that was federal dollars. Made a huge, huge difference. We've been at the table to try to get another round of funding, and now that's just kind of come to a stop. We are concerned. We are looking at other avenues. We're looking at language. How do we say what we need to say? How do we continue to do this work? Yeah.
It seems like grants are really important. Is like most of the grant money coming from like the city or the state, and is there always a grant to apply for in any situation?
So for the Center for Neighborhoods, again, we don't write a whole lot of grants. It has to make sense. And again, if we're not competing with the neighborhood associations, our grants are sort of limited. For the neighborhood associations, grants are huge. But keep in mind, most neighborhood associations are not nonprofit or 501c3s. So we run into that challenge. Fortunately, there's a fiscal agent, a couple of fiscal agents in town where they can funnel those dollars through those entities. But yes, funding is very important, grants are important. I will tell you, for the first time, organizations, local philanthropy, they're starting to recognize the importance of paying these neighborhood leaders. Again, they're volunteers, right? Sometimes they put in just astronomical hours of doing this work, and again, they're not paid. But again, we're seeing this slow change of people starting to write it even in their big grants, that we need a line item to help pay stipends for these neighborhood leaders, to help get food, to help get childcare. Even you guys have free bus, we do too, but it sounds like we may be getting ready to lose that. But for some folks, they don't have a car, and they need to get to this meeting across town, so help them get a bus pass or pay for my bus fare. So yeah, grants are important. Donations are important for the neighborhood leaders. Sometimes they do really small fundraisers, and whenever we can support those, we do. They don't make a ton of money. And then the other thing to think about, a lot of the neighborhood organizations have dues. You can pay dues. At some organizations, you have to be a dues paying member to vote on an issue. Other neighborhoods, it's like dues goes toward dumpster days. We're gonna clean up the neighborhood, we're gonna put dumpsters out here, and we need to pay for those dumpsters. your membership dues goes toward that. So, that help? We're almost at, yes.
I just have one question. And I could be wrong on this, but from my understanding, there's no such organization like this on the UMass campus or in the Amherst area. What would you give for advice for, young community members or people just like looking to start something similar? Because it seems like your organization is still relatively young.
If you're going to tie it into the university, that's a whole nother conversation that we have to have. But one thing I would recommend is looking at because we're not a 501c3, Center for Neighborhoods, so that has its challenges, right? And not so much. You want to look at the structure of how you want to set up this organization. If you're going to be part of the university, you will probably have to follow university guidelines, whatever that looks like. That's one thing. You want to get with the champions of the neighborhoods. And I learned a term here the other night, and I was like, really? Villages. Seriously, I was thinking like M. Night Shyamalan, right? I was like, villages, that's not a bad, wow, this is cool. I've never heard that. So when you're thinking, I'm thinking towns or villages, you want to find the champion in those towns, right? And those are the folks you want to pour your time into and your energy and help build a plan of what this would look like in the community. And then again, you have to have funding. Look for funding. See how the university could leverage some of their assets. If you have to have a meeting, there's lots of space on the community on the university. See if you can have meetings there. See if they would be willing to help sponsor a meal. Just starting from there. Are you gonna do it? Okay. Hopefully